You're listening to Centered and Sent, a podcast of Impact Church, encouraging disciples of Jesus to center their lives on the gospel and to be sent with a kingdom purpose. Hey, Brendan, how you doing?
Pastor Terry, I'm doing good, man.
Well, we welcome everybody to our podcast. We just actually came fresh from a wedding last week, and man, did it invoke a lot of conversation points, didn't it?
Yeah, did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, it was pretty good, and I think I'm tired of weddings for now, but we'll have another wedding probably sometime next month, right? But
after every wedding, you say that's the last wedding you're gonna do.
It's true this time.
Yeah, right.
But Brendan and I, we actually had that wedding. We attended the wedding together, and definitely as pastors, we started talking about the gospel and about Jesus and how every wedding should be centered on Christ. And it just came up with a lot of thoughts and ideas of actually a podcast episode, didn't it?
It did. So we've actually got a few things here, and I think it's going to turn into a few episodes of really breaking down how to have a gospel-centered, not just marriage, but even a gospel-centered wedding.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's get right into it. And I just have a couple of questions. And what are some points that you want to encourage maybe some potential weds-to-be on how can they use their wedding ceremony to honor Christ and even present the gospel?
You know, Pastor Terry, that's some things we were talking about. Is what I tell every couple that I talk to is you've got literally 25 people preparing you for your wedding. But our job as pastors is to prepare you for your marriage. But there are some things we can do in the wedding that are good, that are faithful, that are centered on Jesus. Because the fact is, once you hire a wedding planner, once you hire a photographer, then they hire a staff, to second shoot and videography. And then you've got, waiters and waitresses and venue staff and family members and bridesmaids and groomsmen. And pretty soon you've got a large amount of people who all want a cut of the pie of your wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
And what's important to remember is that your wedding is not the pie. Jesus is the pie. And it's about putting things in there. So here's a few things. Here's the first thing. This is probably going to be revolutionary. But honor Jesus at all times, not just in the ceremony.
Not just the ceremony.
Not just the ceremony. And so this is actually something that I had not thought about, but I used to do weddings, and it always felt really awkward. Like during the ceremony as a pastor, I felt really comfortable. I knew what I was doing. We were honoring Jesus. I felt really good about it. But before the ceremony, there's all these shenanigans happening. After the ceremony, there's this reception thing happening.
Oh, yeah, those are the fun parts.
And it just felt like, where is Jesus in some of this? So one thing, if you're going to have a gospel-centered wedding, honor Christ at all times, not just in the ceremony. This may mean telling your bridesmaids that they cannot invite certain people to parties,
to put it nicely,
or do certain things. Like it may be telling your groomsmen to be on their best behavior because they are to honor Christ along with you, because those are your wishes.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal: like we could be the bad guys as pastors and tell people they got to honor Jesus, but they'll actually listen if it's coming from the bride and groom. So honor Christ at all times, not just the ceremony. That includes the reception. Think about how you dance.
Yeah.
Think about the drinks that you have.
Yeah.
When you get to the end of the night and I stood up there and said, do you take so-and-so to be so-and-so, your wedded wife, and you're like honoring Jesus, and then you go to the ceremony and the bride and groom can't even drive to their honeymoon afterwards. It's kind of an oxymoron.
Yeah, and it brings up a really good point of how, if you really do mean that you want to honor the Lord and you happen to just do it in the ceremony, but pretty much 90% of the rest of the ceremony, including the reception, is not Christ honoring, that is actually a worse testimony. When you just say, it's a hypocritical testimony, and you've made it, in a sense, worse for the gospel, because you're like, well, on one side, let's turn on the switch and say that we're going to love Jesus now, but then once it's our time, quote unquote, Jesus is basically brushed off to the side.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, it just feels dirty as a pastor standing up there doing a religious ceremony with people who are hungover from the night before, and groomsmen who can't even look into the lights because they've got a really bad headache.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah. Well, here's another thing.
Yeah, sure.
This is gonna, again, revolutionary. But in the ceremony, make much of Jesus. And you may say, well, that's a given. But actually, it's not, because I think most couples come with the expectation we're going to make much of them. And that's what we're told, right? It's your day. This is all about you. We're here to honor you. But the fact is, we're not. You get a chance to honor Christ. And so just don't be afraid to make much of Jesus in your ceremony.
Yeah, well, give me an example of that. Like, what is one practical way of how you make much of Jesus and it is not about you?
Well, the biggest way is you let the officiant, the pastor, use your marriage as a picture of the gospel. So don't expect like the pastor to get up and just say, these are two lovely people. Let me tell you their love story. They've written their own vows. They want to read their favorite poem from their favorite book. Like, instead of that, let the pastor get up and preach the gospel using you as an example, so that you are center stage, but you're showing it's actually about Jesus, not about you.
That's good. That's good.
Another thing you can do, as well, speaking of the ceremony, is actually have a desire for the gospel to be preached and for your relatives to come to Christ. Like, don't be nervous about it. Like, this may be the only time some of your aunts and uncles, moms and dads, brothers and sisters, friends are ever going to hear the gospel of Jesus. Like, they're not going to come to church. They're tired of hearing you talk about it. Talking about it at Thanksgiving is only going to invite uproar. So this may be the only time you get everybody together to hear the plain, simple gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that they actually want to listen and can understand.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think understandably that can be kind of tough because, as you mentioned earlier, weddings have the stereotype of, hey, this is our day, this is our special day. We planned for this, especially for women. I planned for this ever since I was a little girl, and to actually give that up, for the sake of a chance for the gospel to be preached, it is a cost. But it's a worthy cost, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's a very worthy cost because, just like you said, for some people, it may be the only time they will actually hear the gospel. And that is, I think, something definitely worth praying over, wrestling with, and just seeking counsel and recognizing, yes, there's a cost to that. But in the long run, man, if it means someone actually coming to the Lord, maybe not even at the ceremony, but just like that is a catalyst to someone coming to the Lord, what a beautiful story that would be.
Well, yeah, we do it at funerals, right? We go to a funeral and we say, Aunt Susie, even though she's no longer with us, she's in a better place, and she would want all of you to join her in that better place. And you do that by trusting in Jesus. And so we're not afraid to do that in funerals because we're feeling the necessity, the urgency of life, right? But in a wedding, life is just getting started for most people. And so we lack that same urgency. But I would say, brothers and sisters, the urgency in your wedding is great to make much of Jesus. So here's the last one.
Cool.
Invite Jesus to the reception. If he's coming to the ceremony, ask him to come to the reception. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, when last time Jesus showed up to a wedding reception, he turned water into wine, and they had a really great time. So you can have a good time with Jesus in the reception. But the other reason is you're showing people not just that you believe religiously the gospel, but you also live out the gospel.
That's right.
And for most of your friends and family who will be at the wedding and the reception, they've heard it at church before, but they've never seen it lived out.
Right.
So I don't know if I can do this or not. We didn't talk about this before the podcast, but this weekend we were at a wedding, and I saw this done beautifully. And basically the groom got up in the reception, thanked everyone for coming, thanked his family and the bride's family. And then he said, even though I love all of you, I want to point out a few special guests that are here. And he pointed to his pastors, his spiritual mentors. And he said, thank you for discipling me and preparing me for this point.
That was really beautiful, actually.
It was amazing because he was saying, hey, we're at the reception, but I want to point out to you guys people who meant something to me. and this is still about Jesus. So anyway, I really loved that.
No, that was good. That was good. Yeah, again, it shows once again, though it seems like such a small thing, it is offering that testimony that is like, no, this is not a separate life. This is not a segregated part of my life. This is who I am. And even though I may not be perfect, I still working and growing in some stuff. Still, I do want to try my best. And the guy did. I mean, try my best to show that this is who I am.
Yeah.
That was really honoring as well. That was really
and
cool.
it was so humble. Like he didn't pull out a napkin that he had written it down. It was just so humble. So, so just to recap, like honor Christ at all times, not just the ceremony. Make sure your bachelorette party honors Jesus as well. Make much of Jesus in the ceremony. Desire for the gospel to be preached and for your relatives to come to Christ. And invite Jesus to the reception. Make much of him. Show how the gospel not just is worthy to be preached, but worthy to be lived out as well.
Amen. Amen. Hey, Brendan, thanks for your time today. And thank you, everyone, for just listening to our episode. I'll see you guys next time.